For those of you who may not know, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And the subtitle is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. That is what this book affords you. And you can see there the logo. That is the Septemics logo, which tells you quite a bit. The word Septemics means literally of or pertaining to seven. The logo is a seven-pointed star. Each ray points in a different direction and is a different color. But between them, they make a spectrum. And that's what you get from each of the 35 scales of Septemics, which between them span the spectrum of human experience. I'm ready to go to the individual scales, meaning they apply more to an individual than to a group. This is the scale of basic purposes. This was the first one that I discovered in the context of Septemics. In other words, when I discovered this scale, that is when the light bulb went on above my head that I had found something that was natural law. This is also the most important because every human being has one of seven basic objectives. All the others are subsets of these. When you find your level on this scale, it is an epiphany. It makes living much easier because you throw out the other six levels and you know what you are about. There's a lot to discuss in this scale. Now notice it says type, linear, quantum, general. Each of the 35 scales is either linear or spiral, quantum or gradual, and general or specific. Now, linear means this scale proceeds the way you would expect. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In a spiral scale, there is an apparent congruence between level 1 and 7, which can cause difficulties because it can fool you. This is a quantum scale, meaning there's no intervening level. You're either at level 1 or level 2. And that is because in order to change the level on this scale, you must reverse polarity. And I'll talk about that more, but that is why it's a quantum scale. You're either a leader or a saint, and if you change from one level to another, that happens in a billionth of a second. This is a general scale, meaning it's not context-driven. It's about a general quality of a person. So once you find your level on the scale, you're done. You can then focus on moving up one level, which is another part of this. But you can't use this in another context unless you want to find somebody else's basic purpose. So for that purpose, it would also be a general fact. Now, factually, most people spend an entire lifetime at one level of this scale. The overwhelming majority of people never change level on the scale. Because it requires the reversal of polarity, you have to have a major incident in your life. Now, if you have some spectacular transformational experience, something that might happen as a result of, let's say, 40 years of meditation, you might go up a level. And if you have some horrific, suppressive incident, like you're in a Nazi death camp and survive, that might knock you down a level. I have no knowledge or experience of anyone moving more than one level on this scale. It's hard enough to even move one level. But finding out the person's level is extremely helpful because let's say you find out that your wife is at level 3. She's probably going to be there for the rest of your life. That means that you know what she is about. It's not going to change next week or next month or next year. It's probably going to stay that way until death.
Why do you consider this scale to be the most important amongst the scales, and how does it enhance our understanding of human behavior?
Okay, as for the first question, what could possibly be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? That's what the person is trying to do all the time, 24 hours a day. The person is trying to achieve the objective specified. And that opens the door to a deep understanding of that person, whether it's yourself or another. Whether you're finding your own level or your spouse's level or your mother's level, it's a big deal finding this because it's a persistent trait. It's on the order of, in the DSM, they have a personality disorder, right?
Yeah.
That's a persistent trait. That affects the person's whole life. Once you know that a person has a certain personality disorder, that gives you a handle on what's going on with this person. Obviously, a personality disorder is a negative thing. In other words, when a person has that, it's a derogatory fact. This is not like that. There is no real derogation in it. It's just saying, this is what the person is trying to do. And I knew that this scale was correct for many decades before I had the idea of Septemics. I had this originally as a 6-level scale because the 5th level is so bizarre that it's not something that was really going to make sense to most people. And I'll get to that in a minute. For example, I know, and when I say know, I don't mean I opine or I believe. I know, the way I know the Pythagorean theorem, the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents previous to that, because I studied them. We have tremendous amounts of data about Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Grant. And if you study them, you can see this. The truth is, it's not hard to find a person's level on any scale if you know the material and you have the data. If you don't have the data, that's a problem. If I ask you, what's my mother's data? First of all, my mother's deceased. You're never going to meet her, right? So that's unknowable to you. You have to observe the person. Now, what I have found is, and I use this in my practice as a human development engineer for 40 years, if you just shut up and listen, the person will tell you. He will tell you his level. He will tell you what he's really about. So the person's behavior and speech is there to guide you into discovering what level the person is at on any scale, including this. When you know somebody's basic purpose, I can tell you from experience that changes your whole way of looking at the person because you know what that person is about. And I'll give you some examples. In the chapter, I give actual historical examples, famous people, what level they were at on this scale. And if you study those people, as I have, I'm an enthusiastic historian, you will see that they conform to this system of analysis. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. I can start to see the importance of this scale and why you place an importance on this scale. And my next question is, can you elaborate on the significance of discovering this scale and its impact on unlocking the remaining data in Septemics?
I had some version of this scale most of my adult life. I had put this scale together in my youth, and I used it on a daily basis for many decades, and it was extremely useful to me. I did not really understand the scale because I did not have all the data that you see on it now, which was the result of extensive research. But I had the scale. Now, in 1995, while pondering one of my clients who was difficult, I realized one day that this scale had a 7th level. And it was obvious to me where to insert it in the scale. It was obvious. And when I inserted it, the scale manifested mathematically. And all of the data on the screen jumped out at me. This is the same type of thing that happened with Einstein developing E equals mc squared. It was developed mathematically. Anybody who knows advanced mathematics and physics can do the calculation and see how we got to it. Now, when he got down to E equals mc squared, which, by the way, most people don't know, is an approximation. It's not an absolute calculation like 2 + 2 = 4. It's actually an approximation. But it's fine because engineers use approximations continuously. When he worked this out, he said, E equals mc squared. That's the most famous formula in the world. And so when I inserted this level, level 5, into the scale, all the mathematical implications jumped out at me. And I saw the whole thing. It went from being a scale to being a table or a plane. Each of the 35 scales is presented like this one in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. People have asked me occasionally, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, having gone to school for 28 years and being a real bookworm, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But what I can tell you is that each of the 35 tables that contains this scale is similar to the periodic table of elements that we have in science. Now, of course, before Dmitri Mendeleev discovered the periodic table, or you might say devised the periodic table, we had chemistry, but he revolutionized it, making it easier to understand, easier to teach, easier to learn. And so that table is in every textbook and in every classroom in the world, in whatever language they're using. Each one of these tables is like a periodic table for the corresponding subject, and there are 35 subjects. When I discovered this, I said, whoa, I don't know what this is, but it's natural law. And the reason I conclude that is, having taken 26 semesters of math, anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law, like the Fibonacci sequence. That led me to ask myself, I've got all these other scales of varying lengths. I wonder if there's some of these are 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I inspected the other scales, and voila, each one of them went to 7 levels. And as each one went to 7 levels, it manifested mathematically. By the time I finished that, I said, whoa, this is a subject. This is a new body of data that's based on natural law. So it all came from finding this, which I had really been working with for a very long time. Can I go on?
Yeah, a question has just come up in me because I'm looking at the scale of basic purposes. I know in your book, you clarify that the levels on the scale of basic purposes are not to be confused with titles or roles that a person that we assume in or are assigned to us in society. And the emphasis is that a person's level on this scale is determined by their courage, their wisdom, their ethics, contrasting with fear, stupidity, and criminality. Why do you stress that a person's level on the scale of basic purposes is distinct from their societal roles?
Look, I'll give you examples, okay? Abraham Lincoln was a leader. That's level 2. That's not hard for most people to grasp, right? He was a head of state and he exerted leadership. However, Adolf Hitler, he was also a head of state, head of a great nation. His basic purpose was destruction, completely different thing. And that type of thing goes on for all of the scales. But in this one, it seems to be easy to say, this guy's president of the United States, he must be a leader. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to study the person, okay? So we have had presidents of the United States who are at level 7, level 6. So if you study these people, and believe me, it's not hard to do that if you want to read the books. How many books are written about Jack Kennedy, about Dwight Eisenhower's? Hundreds. So the data is there. The beauty of this whole system is you're only choosing from among 7 choices. It's not like you go to a smorgasbord and they have 70 foods, right? It's more like you go to In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger, I don't know if you've ever been there.
Yeah,
They have 6 things. That's it. So it's not much of a choice. You either want the cheeseburger or you want it without the cheese. That's about it.
There's definitely a simplicity to it. That's what I love about this. And another question that comes up, if you'll allow me, is that you stress that at any given point in time, an individual is only one of 7 basic objectives in life. And this is an unchanging characteristic. And you explain the implications of this, particularly in terms of helping others. Can you elaborate on the idea that individuals have only one of 7 basic objectives in life at any given time? And how does this affect their behavior and responses?
For example, I mentioned Adolf Hitler. Once you understand that his basic purpose was to destroy, he is very easy to understand. One of my specialties is World War II, which I studied at great length. And of course, Hitler was the central character of all of that. He was the instigator. In fact, I would go so far as to say he was the central character of the 20th century. When I was studying him when I was young, I didn't understand. For example, he had a non-aggression pact with the Russians, and he made that pact so that he would not have to fight a two-front war. After he took over Western Europe, he turned around and attacked the Russians. And I thought, what sense does that make? Hermann Goering told him, if the Russians get into war, we will lose. Hermann Goering was his right-hand man, okay? And Goering was right. Goering was not as crazy as Hitler. He was at level 6, a criminal. He did not intentionally want to destroy things. He was a pleasure seeker. That is what criminals are. So if you study Hitler, you'll see he destroyed his family. He destroyed his nation. He destroyed his military. He destroyed everything he went near, he destroyed, okay? Really, he destroyed Europe, which was at the time the central place on Earth. The central power center on Earth was Europe at that time. And he destroyed it. Then you can say, okay, I can see. His generals told him, if the US gets into the war, we will lose. Many generals told him that because their industrial might is superior to all of Europe combined, okay? He didn't care. He didn't listen. He declared war against them. There was no need for him to do that. The United States declared war against Japan because of Pearl Harbor. Hitler could have just stood pat. It would have been very hard for Roosevelt and his people to get the Americans to fight the Germans if the Germans had not declared war against them, because America was an isolationist country. They would have said, what are we fighting these guys for? We want to fight the Japanese. They're the ones who attacked us. So Hitler played right into his hands. That's destructive. So that's what you get from somebody like that. It's easy to understand. I can tell you, as a serious student of military science, Hitler made something like, depending on how you want to look at it, something like 8 catastrophic mistakes in military science in waging World War II. Each one of them were head scratchers, strictly from a military point of view. So that's why, because he was destructive. And that goes for everybody. Let's take Lincoln, because I mentioned him. In contrast, the objective of a leader is conquest. Now, some people might say, conquest, that's not a good thing. That's a question of whose ox is being gored. When the Allies defeated the Axis in 1945, that was good news for almost everybody. It was even good news for the Japanese, the Germans, and the Italians, who did much better when they didn't have crazy people running their country anymore. So it was clear that Lincoln, in his entire presidency, was determined to conquer the Confederacy. This is not a subtle point. If it weren't for Lincoln, slavery wouldn't have ended. And he couldn't get people on board with him. You know why? Most of them were not leaders. They had other basic purposes. They did not have the drive to conquer that he had. And so the war did not go well. He couldn't get his generals to fight until he found an obscure general named Grant who would fight. And Grant's buddy, there were basically 2 generals who led the Union to victory. Before that, Lincoln had a terrible time. Now, there aren't that many people who are leaders, and so most people do not have a desire to conquer. So he defeated the Confederacy, he ended slavery, and then to put the cherry on the cake, he pushed through the 13th Amendment. That amendment never would have been passed without Lincoln being behind it, which made slavery unconstitutional in the United States. So that is an obvious conquest. That's what he was about. Now, I have to tell you, having studied many of these people, leaders do not have good lives. Most of them come to an untimely demise. Lincoln, after performing what was considered a miracle at that time, for his trouble, got a bullet in the back of the head. Another leader, Alexander Hamilton, similarly was murdered by a political opponent. So that's what happens to leaders. Once you study leaders and you know what they're about, you look at it and you say, oh, okay. It's crystal clear when you study Alexander Hamilton that he was a leader. Now, let me talk about the structure of the scale a little bit so it makes sense to you. So at the left, we have the names of the 7 levels, and next to them, there's either a plus sign or a minus sign. The plus sign or the minus sign does not mean add or subtract. It does not mean good or bad. What it means is inflow or outflow, or to put it another way, reach or withdraw. If you're talking about physics or physical science, it makes more sense to say inflow and outflow. Like the current in your AC line that runs the computer you're looking at right now, it goes one way and then it goes another way, and it goes one way and it goes another way. So it has an inflow and an outflow. Now in the United States, that's 60 cycles per second. So it goes one way for 60th of a second, then it goes another way for 60th of a second. Okay, that was created by Nikola Tesla. And it's all over the world. Everybody uses that now. That's inflow, outflow. Just like your heart, the blood comes in, the blood goes out. The blood comes in, the blood goes out. When you're talking about human behavior, it's easier to understand it in terms of reach and withdraw. So when a person reaches for something, that's an outflow. And when a person withdraws from something, that's an inflow. This is mathematical. This is where mathematics dovetails with psychology, right there. So a saint, for example, is withdrawing. His objective is to transcend. Transcend means withdraw from the world. You're going beyond this world. He's not reaching into the world. His objective is to get out of the world. Whereas the leader, he wants to conquer. That is definitely an outflow as opposed to the winner. The winner is inflowing. What does that mean? He's garnering wealth. He's feathering his nest. He's inflowing stuff to himself. Not only money, limousines, trophy wives, airplanes, whatever is wealth to that guy. If you are an actor, having an Oscar on your mantelpiece is wealth. That's the pinnacle for an actor. Then you go down to the normal. Now, the normal is on an outflow. He's reaching, but he's reaching in a conformist way, meaning this is somebody who doesn't want to rock the boat. If everybody buys an SUV, he buys an SUV, or at least he wants to. If everybody cuts their hair short, he will want to cut his hair short. If everybody gets tattoos, he wants to get a tattoo. That's what the normal is like. This is the largest demographic group. They're not interested in saving the world or hurting anybody. Now, you can say conformity is not a good thing, but think of it this way. The normal is somebody who wants to fit in. He doesn't want to stand out. He wants to fit in. Everybody in his neighborhood goes to the mountains in the summer, so he goes to the mountains in the summer instead of going to the beach. See, he's fitting in. People in his group like to drink beer, so he drinks beer. If he was with people who like to drink wine, he would drink wine because he's a conformist. See, that's an outflow. It's what you might call an insipid outflow, but it's still an outflow. Now, below that is the loser. A loser is not somebody who's doing badly. A person could do badly at any level of the scale. A loser is a person who intends to suffer. Now, you can say that doesn't make any sense. And you're right. It doesn't make any sense. But the loser is a person who has a conscience, which is more than can be said at the person at 6 or 7. And because he has this conscience, he makes himself suffer. So this is the kind of guy who will destroy himself with drugs, with alcohol, with tobacco, with food, with bad relationships, by crashing cars. There's an unlimited number of ways that these people make themselves suffer, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Because if you try to help this person, you're opposing his most basic purpose, and he will not permit it. If you give him $50,000, he'll blow it in Vegas. If you give him a house, he'll burn it down. Not intentionally, but that's what happens. If you give him a car, he'll crash it. If you get him a job, he'll get fired from it. That's what these people do. These people intend to suffer.
As you were talking, it seems clear to me that, and I know it's not hierarchical, but when you look at something like the normal or the loser, why do these individuals tend to be unaware of their basic drive and method?
First of all, there's a couple of answers to that. One reason is they don't have this scale in front of them. Because this book has existed in some form or another for 27 and a half years. And I've been seeing people use this. People get this. This is not obscure. People look at it and they say, oh, yeah, I see, that's right. To the degree that they don't is because they don't understand the word. When you explain to somebody what transcendence means, they say, oh, now I see. My brother never wanted to go out with girls, never wanted to make any money. He wanted to become a priest, and that's what he did. He wants to go to heaven. You see, that's transcendent. So once you see that, you then can say, oh, okay, the guy's a saint.
If we look at the loser as an example, because I'm just trying to delve into some of these characteristics, because you discuss that their self-destructive nature is driven by guilt, maybe shame, their inability to accept help, and the emphasis on the challenges faced by these individuals who attempt to assist these people, to assist losers. It might be in a counseling or therapeutic environment. How do you describe the self-destructiveness of the loser, which I know you just went through, and the role of guilt in their behavior? Because I see individuals who try to help losers, but they encounter many challenges.
Yes, they are defeated every single time. If you try to help somebody and you succeed, that means the person is not at level 5.
Okay. Yeah.
He's at some other level. You have a normal guy, he's down on his luck. You get him a job, you loan him $10, whatever, and he starts to get his life together. Doesn't work with a loser. As I explain in the book, that is why socialistic schemes always fail. There are millions of well-meaning people who want to uplift these people, want to help these people, okay? And they are defeated. Look at history. It doesn't work. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. As a human development engineer, worked with hundreds of clients for many decades, okay? And I ran into all of these types. After a while, when I figured out this level, then I knew not to take up the person. I just see what the person is doing. What is the person really about? And if I see that this person is at level 5, 6, or 7, I just say, have a nice day, goodbye. Because you can't help those people.
In the normal level, it presents as a neutral level, but situated between social and antisocial behaviors. And the inclination is towards traditional institutions and their preferences. How do you characterize the normal level, and what distinguishes it as a neutral level?
The whole idea of conformity is that you're going to keep whatever you have.
Okay.
You're going to fit in. I'll give you an example. My father's father was a very successful man. He owned businesses. He owned a restaurant. He owned a summer resort. He was very successful. Okay. He was born in the 19th century. Never had a telephone. Okay. Lived to 84 years old, had plenty of money, left plenty of money to all of his sons, never had a phone. Why is that? Because the people of his time, they just didn't have phones in their homes. So, okay, fine. So I don't have a phone. So there were a lot of people, elderly people, when the cell phone came out, they didn't get a cell phone for a long time. They were used to the old-fashioned phones. It's a type of conformity. So that is the neutrality that's in it. You're keeping whatever you have because you want to conform. You don't want to stick out. You don't want to rock the boat.
And what about the normal's preferences for traditional institutions and its role as a bridge between social and antisocial behavior?
The main thing about the normal you have to realize is that the normal doesn't want to hurt anybody and doesn't want to help anybody. The average guy, Like in the United States, he's got a house, he's got a mortgage, he's got a spouse, he's got a car in the garage, he's got car payments. He's a regular guy. He's not trying to change anything. He's not Abraham Lincoln, who intended to defeat the Confederacy and end slavery. He was motivated. The normal doesn't have any such motivation like that. His motivation is, for example, people like Seinfeld TV show, right? Okay, I'm going to watch Seinfeld. You know why he watches it? Everybody watches it. And you can use that to spot people. There are some people who say, no, I don't watch Seinfeld. Why do you watch it? Everybody likes it. They like it. I don't like it. I'm not watching it. That person is not a normal.
In a sense, when you conform, you get confirmed because it's the status quo. It's the homeostatic environment that people operate within.
Yeah, on a behavioral level, it's a state of equilibrium, which is why it's neither social nor antisocial. Society is advanced by people at levels 1, 2, and 3, and society is deterred by people at 5, 6, and 7. And the largest demographic group, meaning the 4, they're just in the middle.
You could then say that the top 3 are more sage-like and the bottom 4 are more saboteurs.
The level 5 sabotages himself. The level 6 does not sabotage himself. He sabotages anybody who gets in the way of him. The level 6 is a criminal. He doesn't particularly want to kill you, but he will if you get in his way. He's going to do this drug deal. He's going to make a $1 million profit on it. And if you try to blow the whistle on him, he'll have you killed because he wants that $1 million. Not because he particularly wants you dead. This destructive person is completely crazy. He just destroys things. He's not really motivated by pleasure. So that's why those people are hard to understand.
Inside of the criminal, you describe their self-centered focus and their willingness to pursue their objectives at any cost. But also, I'm really interested in what's your perspective on managing criminals and the role of law and order in controlling them.
Okay, it's very simple. People at level 6 and 7 have to be stopped in order for society to function. You cannot have civil society when people at 6 and 7 are allowed to run free. And history is replete with examples of this. So you look at the history of Rome. When you had Caligula and Nero, they were so crazy and destructive that they were killed. The Romans eventually assassinated them, as opposed to Marcus Aurelius, who was a brilliant man. People still read him to this day. He did good things in general. You have to stop people at 6 and 7, and that's why from the dawn of mankind, there has been police and military. When you defund the police, you are taking the leash off the most vicious dog in the kennel. So let me finish explaining this. As you pointed out, at the top is courage, wisdom, and ethics. At the bottom is fear, stupidity, and criminality. Those are obviously antonyms. And that is the axis. That is what you are measuring in this scale. As you go up each level, you have less fear, less criminality, less stupidity, more courage, more wisdom, more ethics. So when you get to somebody like Hitler, what did you see in Hitler? Fear, stupidity, and criminality. Everybody talks about how evil he was, but you don't hear much of a discussion about how stupid he was. This was a stupid guy. He had the expeditionary force trapped at Dunkirk. He could have captured the whole army, and he let them get away. How stupid is that? Now, of course, I'm glad that the English and the French got away, but strictly from the point of view of a military perspective, that was as stupid as you could get. And the whole history of World War II is just full of his stupidity. When he was told by his generals that if America got in the war, they would lose, he dismissed it. He dismissed the United States, saying, they have a lot of Jews and blacks. He had such low opinion of Jews and blacks that he thought the Jews and the blacks in the United States, it makes the United States a nation of stupid people, and they're not going to accomplish anything. Obviously, that was a stupid conclusion. We had many Jews and blacks, and they contributed to the war effort against him.
Yeah. In a subversive level, a question that comes to mind is that your observation is that subversives are more likely to be found in positions of power. Why might they not be easily identified as such?
First of all, you have to realize that when a person is in fear, he's covert. Let's say you have a guy, he robs a bank. That will be a level 6 behavior, right? Now he's got $100,000 and he's got a gun. He just shot the guard. This guy's in fear. He's in hiding, right? He's on the lam. He gets some basement apartment and stays there for 6 months until the heat goes down because he's a criminal, right? Criminality. And he's stupid. Everybody in the law enforcement area knows that criminals are stupid. That's why they're criminals. If they were smart, they'd get a degree in psychology or law, or they learn how to fix air conditioners. There's all kinds of ways to make money. The people who commit armed robbery, they're stupid people. Because when you break the law, you are making yourself an enemy to the whole society. The society spends millions or billions of dollars hiring professionals to track you down. They give them badges and clubs and handcuffs and guns and the right to shoot you. Okay? How smart is that? Now, of course, not all criminals are equally stupid. And a good example is Carlo Gambino, the head of the famous Gambino crime family.
Yeah.
They never got anything on him. You know why? He was smart. He kept a low profile. He kept his mouth shut. He lived in a middle-class home, in a middle-class neighborhood, drove a middle-class car, sent his son to the same university that I attended. Okay? Regular guy. You'd see him in the neighborhood. He went to the same church that I played baseball for. He was not stupid the way John Gotti was stupid. John Gotti, his successor, who died in prison. So Carlo Gambino was smart enough to not caught. And I happen to know Carlo Gambino was a normal. He was at level 4. They will say, how is being a mafia don conformist? I just told you. He lived in a middle-class house, in a middle-class neighborhood. He never owned a fancy car. He never had custom-made suits. He was like a normal guy. He lived in my neighborhood. I passed his house thousands of times. Everybody knew he lived there. Nobody could get anything on him. There was no evidence. There's a famous story. Gambino was in a restaurant with a bunch of friends having dinner, and some other guy in the mafia came over and insulted him. Gambino didn't argue with him. He didn't raise his voice, didn't say a word. Guy leaves. A couple of weeks later, that guy turns up dead. That's how it was done. And I'm sure they never solved that murder. So Gambino succeeded because he wasn't as stupid as a lot of the people in organized crime. Vito Genovese was a psychopathic murderer. He was a scary dude. Again, you can't tell too much. You can't connect the level with what the person's doing in his life. There are people in the United States government right now who are at level 6 and 7. Because, look, the average person has a degree of courage, wisdom, or ethics. And because of that, they don't want to hurt anybody. They don't want to steal anything. They don't want to clean out your bank account. They don't want to steal your wife. They don't want to kill people with heroin. And that's smart. They're smart enough to see, okay, the mafia's there. I stay away from them and they don't bother me. See, that's smart. That's the average guy. He gets some kind of a training. Maybe he goes in the military and they teach him how to work on aircraft or something, whatever it is. He gets some trade and he has a life. The criminals are only interested in pleasure. Did you ever notice how many obese people there are in the mafia? Just give me that spaghetti. Whereas most people are not motivated fundamentally by pleasure. And this tells you the 7 choices of what motivates people. Like a winner, he doesn't really want pleasure. He wants to win, whatever that means to him. He wants to win. If he's in a baseball game, he wants to win that game. He's not happy if he doesn't win. That's a different type of person from the other 7 levels.
Looking at the winner and the normal, can you discuss the differences between the winner and the normal in terms of their aspirations and contributions to their community and nation?
The winner, as you can see, is on an inflow. He's feathering his nest. He's collecting money, fame, women, yachts, limousines, jewels. Okay, that's what he's about. He wants to win. Now, maybe having an Olympic gold medal around his neck, maybe that's the wealth that he wants. So he can go around the rest of his life and say, I won the decathlon. That's winning. And that medal is his wealth. Now, the normal is not motivated that way. The normal is not driven. He's not particularly feathering his nest. He's just fitting in. It's a different thing. He's the type of guy that when it was popular 50 years ago, most Americans went to church. That guy would go to church. Now, most Americans don't go to church. He wouldn't go to church. You can watch the normal and you can see that as society changes, he changes. Like, for example, in the 70s, many people grew sideburns. Those guys grew sideburns to fit in. Then in the 80s, sideburns went out. They shaved off the sideburns. Now, I know some people to this day have sideburns. They're not conforming. You guys want to shave off your sideburns? That's fine. I'm not shaving mine. That person is not conforming. Or, for example, people grew their hair long in the late 60s and early 70s, right? But when the 80s came, guys started cutting their hair. There are some guys who just kept the long hair. Why do they keep the long hair? They're not going to change.
The more I look into this, and we're only on the first of 35 scales, and you assert that mastering Septemics can really empower individuals to align large bodies of data into a usable form, as has been shown here today, potentially lifting human society out of a long-standing quagmire. What is your vision of Septemics in terms of lifting human society out of a historical quagmire?
I would say if this book were to proliferate, it would have more of an impact than the Bible, than the Quran, than the Tao Te Ching. Do I think that will happen? No, I do not. And the reason it will not is because Earth is controlled by a globalist fascist cabal that is every bit as evil as the Nazis, as the KKK, as the mafia, and they are tightening their grip on the world as we speak. They don't have me murdered. That'll be good.
I really do see your point. And as we conclude, and we've got 34 more slides to go through, but I really want to thank you for your time and your input into the scale of basic purposes.
Before we leave this, I just want to say that these 7 levels break down into 3 subgroups. The top 2 are superhumans, meaning they're humans, but they have powers that most people are never going to have. And the bottom 2 are subhumans, meaning they're humans, but they're really below what most of us would consider human. And then the large group of people in the middle, those are the humans. That's by far the largest group. It's just there alone, that tells you a lot. You could be looking at, let's say you have a terrorist who goes around blowing up things and killing people. He's almost certainly a subhuman. Otherwise, why would he do that? Why would he go around blowing up buses full of children? That's what a subhuman would do. That's why I call him a subhuman. That's an interesting way to look at this and an interesting way to determine someone's level. Because if you look at somebody like, let's say, Gandhi, if you study him, man, he was superhuman. He had no position in the government. He had no money. He wasn't even a good-looking guy. But he freed his nation from the most powerful empire on earth without utilizing any violence. Okay? That's superhuman. He was at level 1. He was a saint.
It was clear that he stood in his own power, whereas the British Empire tried to use force. And his intrinsic power and the rally cry, because of his position and because of what he emanated, he was able to overcome the force that the British Empire tried to enact upon him.
Yes.
So there was that relationship between power and force.
Yes. Similarly, Jesus Christ brought down the Roman Empire. By 300 AD, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. The Romans tried for centuries to exterminate the Christians. The Christians, they would say, denounce your Christianity or we will kill you. They would say, go ahead and kill me. You know why? Those were saints. They knew they were going to die and go to heaven. All right, go ahead, kill me. That's how they brought down the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire just transitioned into the Catholic Church.
The concluding question is that why do you stress the importance of a multidisciplinary approach when studying septemics?
It's a multidisciplinary subject. If you look at all the scales, there is a breadth and depth of scope here that goes beyond anything I know of other than this. This explains human phenomena because each of the 35 scales is unique. Between them, they make it possible to understand all of human phenomena. Now, I'm not invalidating other practices. I know psychology, I use it, I study it, I understand astrology, I understand many things. If I didn't understand many things, I never would have discovered the subject because it would have been in front of my face and I wouldn't have seen what it was, which has been going on for thousands of years. I saw this because I was a polymathic scholar. And so when I would observe these phenomena, I'd say, and I'd write it down. And then you see, I would work on my clients and I would see that they would manifest these things without my ever saying anything to them about it. I would see them go up the scale as I worked with them. There is no theory of septemics. This is all empirical. I worked with hundreds of clients for thousands of hours, clients of every description. They all improved. As they improved, I started to notice that I would be able to predict the outcome of the session, and it would go exactly the way I thought it would go. Not because I said anything, because I basically used Socratic dialogue. I didn't tell anybody anything. Guy comes in and says, I can't get along with my wife. I say, tell me about that. See, I haven't told him anything. And he goes, bop-a-da, 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 bop. So it reminds me of my mother. Oh, really? Tell me about that, bop-a-da, bop. And eventually he says, now I understand. This just happened to me thousands and thousands of times as I was working with these people. And I just made notes. And these scales just appeared in front of me. And I think I was able to figure this out because I'm not a person who's in a niche. I do not fit nicely into Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. Honest to God, I'm not kidding you. I know more about Christianity than most Christians. I know people who won't even associate with me because they consider me not to be a Christian. I also know people who don't want to be around me because they think I'm a Christian. That is the nature of our world. A person gets a hold of something and clings to it for dear life. Like he's in the ocean and he finds a raft and he clings to it and that's it. If you come along and say, I read this book and that book, and I studied this guy and that guy, and there's Aristotle, and there's Cicero, and they don't want to hear about it. By being a polymathic scholar from earliest childhood, eventually I pried my mind open to everything. And I didn't even think of myself as a polymath until just shortly before the book was released, a few years ago. And one day I walk up and say, wait a minute. I guess I'm a polymathic scholar. I just thought of myself as a guy who read a lot of books, took a lot of courses, loved to go to school, and all that data had an effect on me. And most people perceive me as being weird because I don't fit into any niche.
Yeah.
And so most people have a prepared answer. Do you like Donald Trump or do you not like Donald Trump? It's binary. I do not have a binary response to that question or any other question.
You've got eclecticism on one hand and skepticism on the other. And that's the beauty of this, is you've drawn from so many diverse areas and plugged it into these scales, which makes total sense to me. I certainly do not think you're weird at all. I think you're brilliant. And I think that this is an incredible work and something that the world really needs to get a deeper penetration and a better understanding of the human condition and where you sit on that scale and how you can progress.
Yes, where you sit on 35 scale, because you have to realize that The bottom line here, relative to the public, is that any question, dilemma, problem, difficulty in your life can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one. If a guy comes to me with a problem, I have no difficulty finding multiple scales that we can use to analyze the situation. Therefore, in my own life, I don't really have problems. Everything resolves in my mind very easily. Now, the fact that I've been meditating my entire life is relevant to all of this because that's where things dissolve. But knowing all this data, it's the chicken or the egg thing. You can say the meditation led me to figuring this out, and you can say figuring this out gets used in the meditation, and both of them are true.
Maybe they both come from the same denomination.
Yeah, these are naturally occurring phenomena. That is the main point. It's just like the Fibonacci sequence. If you don't know about the Fibonacci sequence, look it up, and you'll see that creatures of many species have been constructing themselves for millions of years according to Fibonacci numbers. Those creatures don't know anything about numbers. They don't know anything about Fibonacci. But if you look at a sunflower or a seashell, there it is. And Fibonacci came along and worked out the actual formula. There's an actual formula, and we know the Fibonacci numbers to infinity. So he did with that phenomena the same thing that I did with Septemics. He looked at it and he said, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. And he worked backwards, reverse engineered it from the phenomena and worked out the formula. And then when he cross-referenced it again against all these different things in life, it always works. And that is what we call the Fibonacci sequence. Good news here is the Fibonacci sequence doesn't have much to do with human behavior. This has everything to do with human behavior. And in fact, human behavior is too small a word. It's human phenomena, because there's a scale of civilization. There's a scale of spiritual identity. There's a scale of politics. These are things that go well beyond human behavior in the sense that people normally think of it, because there's group septemics and individual septemics.
You stress the importance of using a dictionary while studying this, and you stress that each level of the scale must be fully understood for the system to make sense, like any system. To my mind, these scales are constructed using carefully selected words, as in the glossary within the book, so that the clarity of language is crucial for clear communication of the concepts, because many people say words, but when you ask them, what does it mean? They fail miserably.
That's right. In fact, I can tell you, I've been involved in education continuously from the age of 3, and I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of people. I never ask a student, do you know what this word means? I ask him, what is the definition of the word human? And if I do not get a correct, direct answer in 1 second, I make him look it up. Because if you ask him, do you know what the word human means? He'll say yes. So I've been able to resolve all kinds of things just by getting people to know the names. When people know the name of the thing, they say, oh, that's what this is. Let me tell you a fact that's relevant to this discussion. I carried with me on my person all over the country for 10 years an unabridged dictionary. Wherever I was, in a motel room, on a train, on a subway, when a word came up, I looked it up. I'm not talking about some dinky little dictionary. I'm talking about a full-size dictionary. And by then, I knew English is such a vast language, and there's multiple meanings of almost every word. Most people don't use words without even knowing all the meanings of the word. And communication is inherently imprecise. And I went to the opposite extreme of finding the exact right word. And that took more time in creating this book than any other single thing.
Jim, I want to thank you so much for the work that you've put into Septemics and making this public as well. And I want to continue the journey with you so we can get this out into the world and hopefully enlighten more people and give them a different perspectival lens to look through and see the simplicity of this and the efficacy of it as well.
The efficacy comes from the simplicity. In closing for today, I invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, Septemics, where you can read what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read many sections of the book itself. And if you're interested, you can listen to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics by yours truly.
Jim, thank you so much. And we will continue.
Thanks, Peter.